Welcome to PowerShift, a series where we bring together the brightest minds shaping the future of energy. In this conversation, we uncovered innovations, investment, and leadership strategies that transforming the energy landscape, and a special focus on geothermal and the role on the energy transition evolution. And who is better to launch this series with than Josh Prueher, CEO of XGS Energy, a company at the forefront of the next geothermal generation technologies. Josh has an impressive track record in energy storage, power market, and renewables, having previously led FlexGen, one of the top technology company that provides for energy storage and Broadreach Power, a firm focus on energy market optimization. So welcome, Josh. It's so exciting to kick off this series with you.
Thank you.
So do you want to give us, the audience, a little bit about your background?
Sure. I probably have the gray hair to prove that I've been commercializing battery storage for almost 15 years. The first company we built mission critical microgrids in Iraq and Afghanistan for the US military. I'm a military veteran. And really pioneered the integration of lithium-ion batteries in those kind of heavily ruggedized applications, but really understood the value of, in that case, storage in just power systems broadly. Those are smaller power systems and remote. And then we used that understanding to found a series of companies, as you mentioned, FlexGen, which built big utility scale battery projects, so big infrastructure projects for utilities, power developers, and independent power producers. And then we kind of forward integrated, if you want to think about it in kind of MBA terms, into the market of owning these projects ourselves and created Broadreach, which became one of the largest standalone storage IPPs. So we built big battery systems, owned, operated, and importantly commercialized them, meaning trading and hedging in the wholesale power markets, mostly in North America, Texas, California, other markets where you can, there are deregulated markets where you can trade.
Josh, this series is kind of important and it's a big deal for us because we are really bringing the key stakeholders and influential leaders to not only talk about geothermal, but also the importance of power and different energy mix that we bring to generate power. What do you expect that to accomplish after this series this year with talking with different various sectors, leaders?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. My wife always teases me, now having done sort of the fifth company in the energy transition, that it seems like there's still so much more room to run. I seem more excited every single time because the opportunity continues to grow. And I say energy transition because I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm a climate zealot. I think we understand how power markets work and we understand the tools, meaning the technology and project type infrastructure that you can use to deliver what the market needs. And so I still feel like there is an enormous opportunity not only for the markets to evolve, but for innovative technical solutions or technology solutions to come into the market and really change things pretty materially. I think geothermal is, after having spent probably about 18 months trying to evaluate where we thought there would be a real opportunity, particularly around clean, firm power, having looked at things like small modular reactors and other types of technology, we really developed a lot of conviction around geothermal in particular, but always were concerned about financeability. I'm kind of a finance guy, I was a banker in my former life, and so having worked in the battery industry and taking batteries from very small scale projects into big utility scale billion-dollar assets, you have to be able to access low-cost financing, meaning bank financing, and therefore you need a proven, predictable, very quantifiable technology. And so I'm not necessarily someone who thinks, hey, I've got a technology, let me push it into the market. We really look at geothermal as there's a market need for clean, firm power. What's the tool that we can use to deliver that in a cost-effective way? Cost-effective not only meaning what's the cost to build it, but also the cost to finance it. So I think this series is going to look at a variety of things in the power industry. To be successful in the power industry, you have to understand markets, you have to understand finance, and you also have to understand regulation. And so I think you're going to cover a lot of those topics in this series. And the intersection of those three things is where you're going to build successful infrastructure.
I would like to go a little bit to the geothermal segment, which because you have worked across the multiple energy sectors, storage, grid management, and do you see geothermal is really game changer?
I do, and probably in ways that I didn't even anticipate when we started looking for it. I mean, the market needs clean, firm power, period. And again, the temptation in power markets is to think about them as sort of this monolithic, like all the world is the same. In reality, a power market is very geographically isolated. So a solution that's going to make sense in one location, say the northeastern United States, is dramatically different than the solution that's going to make sense in the desert Southwest or in California, for instance. It's always going to be a function of the resource, whether it be a hydrocarbon or some sort of clean resource, the load dynamics in that location, and then grid dynamics around transmission constraints and other things that determine basically the price of electricity in various locations, and in the context of geothermal, heat as well. And so, I think it's always a temptation for people who are technology people to say, I've got a hammer, everywhere I look there's a nail. In reality, in energy infrastructure, you're trying to build a house, and so you have to show up with a toolbox. Geothermal, in my view, is the one technology that's going to be able to deliver clean duration, frankly, faster at scale than anything else in the industry, and that's why we're pretty excited about the opportunity.
What do you think about the relationship between energy storage and geothermal based on your past experience in FlexGen and Broadreach? So do you think they are going to be complementary for certain power project? And is it relates to geographic location, that in certain geographies this might be a better solution?
Yeah, I think the real interesting marriage between those two technologies is, honestly, it's in the context of data centers, right? Because the other element is not all electricity is the same. I have to be able to provide a certain type of electricity, meaning a degree of reliability, whether it be N+1, meaning I have to service everything you need +1 times or 2 times. So in a situation where there is a customer who has a reliability requirement, not just for energy when it's produced, but energy at certain times of day and backup energy, which is often the case with data centers, then the integration of geothermal storage and even other types of generation, depending on, again, the location of the project, makes an enormous amount of sense. Again, you're trying to build that house analogy using all of the tools at your disposal to deliver the best outcome for the customer. So the marriage of storage and geothermal can be a really, really powerful one, both for reliability as well as shifting energy to times of day when it's most needed.
Excellent. So that leads us to the next question, which is where do you see geothermal fitting into the broader power market strategy? So do you think it's still, so where we are in terms of next generation technology, how it can be like a commercial solution in the power market strategy, where we need to go?
Yeah, I mean, this has always been the challenge. As I started looking, frankly, kind of from an investor lens, at the geothermal industry broadly, geothermal, traditional hydrothermal has had some challenges with respect to scaling, because there are only limited geographies where you can find hot rock, water, and what's called subsurface flow in order to make a project work. And even then, as people would tell you, some of the independent engineers who are the gatekeepers to project finance in the industry would tell you, once you've found those things in geothermal, that's when your problems really start. And so the more we probed into the difficulties of scaling and financing geothermal, we actually realized that water was probably the biggest problem. It's ironically the enabler of traditional geothermal, and frankly, it's the enabler of a lot of different approaches to next generation geothermal. But we felt like tying your fate to another scarce resource that's geographically constrained, that has value in and of itself, and in the most cases of what's called open hole geothermal, it creates a lot of operating problems. I mean, think about running water through rock, which is kind of the foundation of traditional geothermal, and a lot of next generation geothermal. You're literally eroding your asset every minute of every day. It's like building a house and then literally just pelting it with sand or some sort of erosive material all day long every day. And so we started looking really carefully about how could we minimize or mitigate or de-risk the exposure to water, and the other element is sort of geological specifications that you need. And then we got really, really excited about this XGS technology because of the application of highly conductive materials, which helps with heat transfer. But most importantly, the addition of that material allows you to have what's called a fully closed loop. So you basically don't need any water or other working fluid. It's just a tiny, tiny amount, and it never touches rock. And so that goes back to the financing premise, is that it becomes a situation where you can finance this because you have a very, very predictable, basically solid state system that is quantifiably predictable over very long, decade-long performance cycles. And that is what's tailor-made for infrastructure financing. People like really boring, really predictable, really quantitative information from an engineering perspective in order to finance it. So that's the most promising thing. Then we got really excited because we realized, well, by isolating geothermal power projects from the requirement for water and geology, well, let's look at the earth, and then I'm looking for places where there's just hot rock, and it turns out it's everywhere. So the development opportunity is massive. I think it's actually probably the biggest development opportunity in the entire energy transition. One of my former colleagues, we were talking about this when we sort of first came across XGS, and they said, listen, once this is commercialized, this is a bigger opportunity in terms of scale than when we first realized that like a photon hitting a silicon panel released an electron. Like, this is bigger than solar in terms of scale and opportunity, because it also is 24/7 clean power, which has a real premium in the market. Again, it's that notion of like, we're not looking for a technology, we're looking for a tool to service a market need. That's what gets us so excited about geothermal.
So to just summarize what you said, because I love that how you're always talking about the two things, is hard to find, hard to finance, traditional geothermal, because as you said, geographical location impacts, because most of the traditional or hydrothermal are sitting on the volcanic area. Either the rock has a certain characteristics or fracture or water exists, or the man-made reservoir or running a large volume of the water in the subsurface is really make the reservoir integrity in danger. And financing part, which is upfront cost and risk. So with predictable solution that you can exactly say how much megawatt thermal and megawatt electric you produce, and you reduce the cost of the O&M, right, in the lifetime of the project development, it's a game changer.
It's huge, and it really requires you to think about like the mindset of being an owner of this asset, right? I mean, if you have a technology, oftentimes you're trying to like sell and convince people that what you have is great. But if you're selling it, then someone else owns it, then it's kind of their problem. And this is what we did at Broadreach and FlexGen, is if you really take that owner mindset, meaning that I care about owning and optimizing this thing for the very long term, which is what energy infrastructure is about from an investment perspective, then I really care about the quality and the durability and the financeability and the predictability of the technology. And you're not going to take a flyer on something just because it's some newfangled technology. You want something that's that is, again, quantifiably predictable.
So when you wake up in the morning, what makes your mind so busy? Do you more think about technology, commercial, investors?
I get most excited about the markets. I think there are, we're at a unique time where there is actual load growth in OECD countries, principally driven by AI data center demand. And that may temper over time, but I've been saying it may temper over time for the last year, and it hasn't tempered. So I feel like there is a pretty amazing opportunity. Growth, as you know, growth can cure a lot of problems. And on the grid, growth can enable a lot of really exciting kind of transformations and build outs of new technology or new tools that can service that growth better than traditional tools. So the market demand is quite strong right now. If anything, I think it's a question of how quickly can some of these new technologies achieve what I think of as true commercialization, which is your ability to kind of get real non-recourse project finance debt from banks, which again is, from a financing and cost of capital perspective, is the requirement to scale globally. You need to move quickly, and there's just no substitution for operating hours. So the sooner you can get into the market, build more quantitative data around the performance of a particular tool or set of tools, the lower your cost of capital, the faster you're going to be able to go, and you start to kind of create almost like a flywheel that starts to accelerate over time. And so, you can sense there's a lot of urgency in what we're doing right now to try to achieve that.
Absolutely. And now I want to shift a little bit on one of the most exciting development, which is very big in the energy segment, when we heard about the companies that providing clean power like Constellation, that they have a portfolio of the mixed renewables from nuclear, solar, wind, hydro, and now geothermal. So does it excite you? What is your thought around that?
Yeah, I mean, no secret, Constellation is one of the lead investors in XGS, and we were really gratified because I think when we got involved, again, we saw it as a tool that was really going to resonate in the power industry. And so as we started to engage investors and counterparties, we really sort of wanted to test whether what we've been talking about here today in the context of XGS Geothermal would resonate with people who want to own power. We can tell ourselves that, but do other people agree with us? And I think we've had a lot of validation from investors and off-takers that that's the case. And also that it is an important, but not the only tool in the toolbox, right? In certain parts of the country or the world, we're not going to go develop projects in the U.S. Northeast. That's just not a place where our technology is going to be appropriate. And so there are other technologies that are going to service that market better. So it's really important to have insights from not only Constellation, certainly in North America, but we have a number of other investors globally in the Asia Pacific region, in the Middle East, who give us insights into, again, what those power markets need, and their capital will bring us into those markets to scale the technology once it's proven our operating history.
Great. So for the industry as a whole, what things need to be happen that geothermal be more serious into the mainstream?
I mean, it's really time. I talk a lot about like the predictability and the modeling that we can do around new technology, but I remember the early days of batteries. People thought if you looked at a lithium-ion battery wrong, it would catch on fire, right? I mean, those were the days that we started this out, and no one wanted to finance it. And you could tell them and you could show them test results and lab results and all these things all you wanted till you're blue in the face. But ultimately, it's a roadmap, and you have to get operating hours. And so you build small systems, and they operate for a while, and people get comfortable with the fact that, okay, you said this was going to happen for the next 9 months, and it happened. And so actually, now you've got some validity in your predictive model. It's not just a model, it's actually empirical results. And you eventually sort of do that more and more, and in sort of system designs that match what you're ultimately going to build and scale, and people get comfortable with that, right? I mean, it's just natural, but there is almost no substitute. We used to say it's pretty hard to compress like 10,000 operating hours. You just need 10,000 operating hours, and so the way to compress it is to build multiple projects and sort of accumulate those operating hours. So that's really what's required, is just getting into the market, starting to build more and more empirical data. I think, unfortunately, it also means that some technologies will probably fail, right? I think there's always a lot of interest in people who try to get technology into the market and then get a project to what's called COD, commercial operations, and then they think, oh, what happens after that? Again, in geothermal, that's always been the problem, is that after you've put a project into operation, there's been this horrific life cycle cost profile that not only is really high as a percentage of your initial CapEx, but it's also quite unpredictable because you're running water through rock and you have subsurface problems and water escaping and all sorts of issues. So again, as an owner of an asset, you really have to think, if I'm going to own this for the next 30 years, or in the case of geothermal, maybe the next 50 or 100 years, what is this asset going to look like over that period of time? That's what really matters, because that's what a financer cares about.
Great. So what is XGS roadmap? How do you see the number of the megawatt hour of power that we are going to develop in the next 2 years? What is the technology roadmap? What is the commercial roadmap? How do you see the XGS in 2 years?
Yeah, I mean, it can't happen fast enough, and I think this is why, again, we consider it to be a tool in a toolbox, and are really, really lucky to have capital partners, operating partners, counterparties in the power markets to help us execute. It's a really exciting time, and having built a few of these companies where you've kind of gone from first of a kind, sort of where we are now at XGS, to scaling in a pretty massive way. There's probably no credible way we could do that without real good partners, capital partners and execution partners. And so, you lead obviously our engagement with a lot of the oil field services companies, the surface EPCs, all of what I think of as the vendor universe and supply chain that are going to help us build our pipeline. And then, engaging finance is sort of my domain, where I think there's a lot of interest in geothermal and there's a lot of capital that's flowing in. But the real next bounce of the ball is going to be how quickly can we access that low cost capital. For our purposes, it can't happen quickly enough because, let's see, we've got 183 megawatt pipeline that we're going to build by 2028, another 410 megawatts in 2029 in the US, and another 240 megawatts internationally in 2029, and then another 1,210 megawatts in 2030, by 2030. So cumulatively, that is a big number in general. It's an incredibly large number for a company as new as XGS is. But again, with good partners like we have, I think we can execute on that. The real roadmap is going to be, how do you prudently build projects, build operating hours with, to basically show that your technology can warrant that lower cost of capital. Once you can access that lower cost of capital, as you know, the technology is ready for full-scale commercialization. We just need to prove it.
I would like to ask you, if you were not in energy industry, what would you pick as your job?
I'd write history books. That's always been my dream, is to sit back and read about history. I'm a history guy and kind of a junkie about that sort of thing. So I'd be a kind of a nerdy writer if I could.
You? Okay, great. And what is your hobbies?
I probably play too much golf. My wife and I play a lot of tennis. Those are the sorts of things.
Josh, this was a fascinating conversation. So thank you to be here. We are excited to kick off this session with you, and then also stay tuned with us. We are bringing a lot of influential leaders in this segment, from technology innovators, investors, as well as policymakers that really unlock this potential of geothermal energy. So we are seeing you very soon on the next episode. So thank you.
Thanks, Ghazal.
Thank you.